As Dominican Sisters, we are called to preach the word in this time and place, wherever we are, and that is the word of Jesus Christ, the gospel. At St. Dominic's, we're treating not only maybe a physical ailment, but the whole person, the mind, the body, the spirit, and to make sure that what we're giving is not just physical health care, but a compassionate response to the person.
When I talk about downtown Jackson in 1946, it was a different climate. It was a different world. I see the cars parked on the street on Capitol Street. And up the street, I see H.L. Green's. And on up the street, I see the Crystal on a corner.
Everything was downtown. When it came time to shop, you went downtown. And I think the neatest thing I remember is each store we went to, there was an individual in that store that knew my mother, knew us, went straight to that person, and they would take care of you. You know, so it was, in a way, it was a small town. It wasn't anything like we have today.
Business community really was a little concerned about the fact that there was only one medical facility here. It's not a good idea to have all of your health care in the hands of one entity.
It was back in the early 40s, or during the war, and Mr. Kennington he and his wife had been on a trip, and she had gotten sick and ended up at a Catholic hospital that was run by some nuns. And he was so impressed with it that when he came back home, he got to talking with my dad and said, we need a Catholic hospital here in Jackson.
And he said, well, we ought to get some sisters to come because they know how to manage things. They have a good reputation. They're compassionate. We should try to bring some sisters.
And my dad said, I don't think that's going to work, Jack, because Catholics were a very minute part of the population at the time. But anyhow, they turned around and came back and saw Bishop Brunini and put the bug in his ear. And Bishop Brunini says, well, let me see what I can do.
So he found out about our community. Mother Mildred Cleary said that she was open to investigating. She sent 2 sisters down here to look at the facility and to meet with the doctors.
There are not some sisters around in Jackson that they go to and say, would you all like to run a hospital? They went to Springfield, and they talked to the Dominican Sisters up there, and they said, would you be willing to come to this difficult environment down here? So the Mother House was the entity that made those decisions to send the sisters down here.
So we couldn't wait to get started, and it didn't take very long to find our friends. Mrs. Louise Manship, she was our friend, and she went up and down Capitol Street to tell everybody that the sisters were coming, and they raised a lot of funds just going up and down Capitol Street.
We bought the building, and on April 15th, it became St. Dominic Hospital.
It was one of the really big things that happened to me as a 7-year-old. I was able to go to the dedication of the new hospital that the St. Dominic Sisters were going to operate in Jackson, Mississippi. And I can still remember Bishop Giroux and the nuns being there. That was my first real dealing with Dominican nuns.
I know some of the sisters that were strong in character. They had courage, they had vision, and they had love. They fell in love immediately with the people here in Mississippi. The people here welcomed them, even though we were from the north and we were, kind of strange. They've never seen Dominican sisters before. They
would have been Midwestern sisters, very Catholic, but Midwesterners with no relationship to the South, no connections with a place like Mississippi. They were coming into an absolutely alien environment. They put their head down and they went to work, and they knew what they were doing, and they were committed.
I was a farm girl, lived out in the country. In fact, I had been to very few places. I had just made profession of vows, and then I got my assignment to go to Jackson, Mississippi, which was the following day. It was I believe it's January the 4th that I made my profession. January 5th, I was on the Illinois Central train coming to Mississippi. And we arrived here, I wanted to say, about midnight on January the 5th. And Sister Helmery, who was the prioress and also the administrator of the hospital at that time, asked me, "What are you doing here?" I don't believe she knew I was coming. And then she continued to say, "Are you a nurse?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Are you a respiratory therapist?" I said, "No." She said, "Do you do music?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Nothing."
The leaders of the mother house would say to Sister X and Sister Y and Sister, "Here's your assignment. You're going to Jackson, Mississippi. You may have been born in Quincy, Illinois, but you're going to Jackson, Mississippi, and that's where you're going to serve your mission." And I'm sure they would say, "Where's that?"
The Dominican nuns setting into the hospital area all of a sudden became known for the work that they did and how they operated that hospital.
The sisters earned everybody's respect pretty quick. They had tremendous work ethics. They had no distractions, and that's why this place succeeded, because of the complete focus of a group like that to do this job and to perform this mission.
The original Jackson Infirmary was very much like walking into a doctor's office, if you will. You walked in and there was a desk there where you signed in and so forth. Nothing anywhere close to what we look at today when you go into a hospital.
On the southwest corner, 1 block north of Capitol Street, was an old home. 2 of them, I think, really. They're connected with a walkway. And the hospital rooms and the operating rooms and whatever was there was just adapted from the old home. As far as being a hospital, it didn't look like one and was not set up to be one.
Sister Mary Robert reported back, it'll take $100,000 worth of soap just to clean up the place.
It was just in a deplorable condition. And we were determined that we were not going to move in or consider that a new St. Dominic's for Jackson in the condition that it was.
It was a pretty run-down place. And yet, sisters are used to making do with what you have at hand. And there's no substitute for elbow grease.
We just brought in brooms and buckets and mops and all kinds of artillery that you use in cleaning up a place like that.
So I always say there's clean and there's Dominican clean.
When our community first came to Jackson, it was in response to a need that was articulated to help in the hospital clinic that was downtown. When we came, we recognized that there was not only the need for healing of body, but healing of relationships. And one of the things that we did very soon in our coming was to serve persons of color with persons who are white together.
Yes, when the sisters arrived here in 1946, I think that they were very surprised at the atrocities that they were seeing in the way the people of color were being treated, and they immediately, with compassion and caring hands, stepped in to see that the preferential option of the poor was going to be met.
From our very beginning, our sisters were very much a part of a movement that was to treat people with dignity and equality.
Well, they said that the blacks, their patient rooms were in the area down there in the basement, and that there was mud floors. And they, at that time, they did move the people of color out of this area that was so atrocious to them when they arrived, and the people of color were moved up into the areas where the other patients were being placed.
That probably was going against lots of grains, but they were given respect. And of course, this was way before wide-scale desegregation in the South. When you're not at the actual receiving end of that kind of intolerance and prejudice, it's different. But it makes you all the more desirous of wanting to do whatever you can to right the situation.
We knew from the beginning that we would need a replacement facility, and so about a year later, they began organizing for a fundraising effort In those years following World War II, the population of Jackson was growing very rapidly. There was definitely a need for a larger hospital.
We didn't know where it was going to be. We didn't know how we were going to get the funds, but we knew we were going to get them somehow, and we knew that we were going to have a new hospital someplace.
When they moved from where they were to build a new hospital, that couldn't have been done with just Catholic funds. That had to be done by support from a lot of people in the community. So there was a generalized support, I think, among the medical community and among the business community for there to be another hospital here.
And so they were able to seek the wisdom and the support of various businessmen who went out and scoped out some land for the sisters to purchase.
We had hoped to buy land closer to downtown Jackson, but we ended up with the piece of land on Lakeland Drive.
This was land that nobody wanted. If I remember, Lakeland Drive was just a mud dirt road.
It was just a wooded area. There was nothing there at all.
In fact, it was state property and surrounded by state-owned property. But it turned out to be the best location because, one, it's the highest point in the Jackson area, and so whatever we built here would be very visible. And it turned out to be along the route for the I-55 corridor.
And this was the land that was offered to us, but if you look at it now, the Lord must have picked it out because it's a prime spot in Jackson up on the hill. So I think the Lord had us in mind when He picked this place for our hospital.
There was no problem about it. They moved in their big trucks and their tractors and started grading the land out there. They didn't ask anybody if they could do it this way or that way or another way.
So the Maloney brothers excavating, they mortgaged their heavy equipment for $100,000 because that was how much more we needed in order to finish the building on Lakeland Drive.
It was absolutely marvelous the way it moved along. And most of these people on this committee that worked so hard on it were not Catholic, but they were had the love of the Lord in their hearts, and they put it all together. When we got all ready to move into the new hospital, which we moved forward very, very fast. Anybody that could help, that had a car, a truck, or whatever, they brought it forth and gave all the muscle that we needed.
Facility-wide, I think the new hospital, of course, was up to date for its time, and certainly had so much more to offer beyond the poor little old place in downtown Jackson.
I do have memories of the first building with the circular drive. It was 5-6 stories, and I just remember how proud my dad was, of that building being built and getting it, just planting the seed to get the hospital started here.
And the sisters lived on the top of the hospital, the original hospital, and they lived in rather frugal conditions there, and it was always about ministry. The sisters were not wasteful. You were very frugal. You took care of things, and everything was austere.
Sister Rita Rose, who was the administrator when I first went there, had a real thing about the spirit of the hospital, and I think that she was a perfectionist and also insisted that things be right. They had to look right, but they had to be right.
The operations did not meet our standards, and so one of the things that happened in those early days was to impress upon the employees, many of whom stayed over from the days of the infirmary, that now there were new higher standards in place. And as one of the sisters, Sister Josephine Therese, put it to me, they either got on board very quickly or they were no longer working for St. Dominic's.
But it was amazing that the turnaround of attitude of all the employees in patient care at St. Dominic's Hospital.
Oh, it's always been about the patient care. The patient was the thrust of everybody's attention, and that was a wonderful thing about the nursing school. When you were training nurses that way, and the nurses, the student nurses, were very well supervised, but everything was patient care.
We all were here for one thing, to learn how to take care of patients. And the sisters did such a beautiful job with us. And that were very intense. The nursing dorm was a very strict environment. Before you left for either clinicals or classes, your bed had to be made a certain way. The corners on the sheets had to be perfect, and they were checked.
Everything was treated on the same floors, and, you didn't have a burn clinic or whatever. You had all types of patients suffering everything on the same floors. The main thing was you got good nursing care and you got good doctor care, and that was the thrust of the hospital back then.
The situation still was that it had to be segregated, that there was one floor in one wing of the hospital where the black patients were assigned. And that is the way that it had to be until the civil rights legislation was passed.
I was just so determined that we were doing to do this for the right reasons, and not completely just because it was a federal law. We were trying to turn this thing around so that everybody would understand that we were doing this because it was the right thing to do.
And St. Dominic's made a commitment from the top to be a part of that movement. And I think understood that Mississippi as a whole needed to come a long way to meet the needs of its people, and that some things were just not going to be acceptable.
And so there was not only the legal imperative to desegregate, there was a moral imperative as well.
I came coming from a good program. I came with, I believe, proper credentials. And I walked right in. I had no trouble in being credentialed. I think in those days I even was granted temporary privileges so that I could start up right away.
Probably some people were critical and thought we didn't do enough soon enough. But taking it in the steps and following good advice, it really paid off in the long run and enabled the sisters to finally accomplish their goal of having the full integration of the hospital.
This whole thing just came together like a wonderful miracle coming down from the sky.
When Sister Josephine came to Jackson, she was facing some pretty tough odds. She was female, she was Catholic. She was in the South, a Yankee. She had an agenda.
Think of that world back then. Think of how many women executives you ever heard of back in those days. There weren't any. And for her to do what she did, she had to have a combination of intelligence, perseverance, and, by God, focus.
She was tough, but, you're going to run a business like that, you got to be tough. Somebody's got to be the person that takes the bull by the horns and makes it go.
Sister Josephine could make you do anything.
The sisters were willing to take the risk to go out and do things first, and with amazing results and God's blessing, I'm sure.
The Cath Lab at St. Dominic has been very successful. We started in 1973, and we met with Sister Josephine, who was the hospital administrator, and explained what we wanted to try to do to develop a heart program here. They were looking to develop a heart program, and she asked lots of questions about how we would utilize equipment that the hospital would obtain for the cath lab and for bypass surgery. Good questions. We answered those.
So in 1974, we did the first coronary artery bypass here. It was amazing to me how supportive Sister Josephine and St. Dominic was to offer that opportunity for us.
The first open heart was taking place in the surgical suite. Where was Sister Josephine Trees? I was in the chapel praying about this because I thought if that open heart moves along well and has no problems, we're ready to go.
This is a remarkable person. She can adjust, she could talk to anyone, anywhere, and always with her heart in this institution.
Sister JT was one of those people you just never said no to. She knew what she wanted. She wanted to build a hospital that had the spirit that she had and the desire that she had to take care of people the way she wanted them taken care of.
And I knew that I had some big shoes to fill when I took this role, and I'm just privileged to have lived with her, prayed with her, and served with her.
Sister Dorothea, of course, succeeded Sister Josephine as the principal here. And Sister Dorothea had spent some time at the hospital. She was a dietitian.
Sister Dorothea was the one, and when she came in, everything flowed straight back to how it was with Sister JT.
You looked at Sister and you asked her, what do you think we ought to do? She says, you do what's right. You do what's right. If you do what's right on a regular basis, everything's going to be okay.
And that belief is deeply founded because in my years of dealing with the Dominican Sisters, one of the things I have learned is they truly are dedicated. Over and over again through the years, I have heard Sister Dorothea say, I don't know whether that's the way somebody else wants it done, but as far as I'm concerned, that's the way we ought to do it, representing the church and our religion, and that is the way we will do it.
Sister Trinita is, in my opinion, a very, very integral part of the success of St. Dominic's as we know it today.
Sister Trinita has a wonderful ministry in the clinic that she has in downtown Jackson. That is a very fine example of meeting the needs where the people are. And her service also in collaboration with the soup kitchen in the building in which they occupy together. There's a real collaboration of not only helping with the health care, but feeding the hungry. It all comes in together.
She is a warrior. She is the individual who cares a great deal about the disenfranchised.
The most meaningful thing is no matter what programs we have attempted to better patient care and to bring in more compassion and loving hearts, caring hands, the different programs that we have started, we have always been very successful with. We've had such cooperation from our employees, from our physicians, no matter what we tried to do.
The caravan is another aspect of how we reach out and look at not just how we provide medical care, but how do we help people live healthier. They go to senior centers, they go to daycare centers, they go to schools, and they go into the areas where people are most vulnerable.
It always has impressed me that when I go out to St. Catherine's, every employee out there always has a good morning and hello, and you can see the care and the feelings that they have for the residents out there.
My service at St. Catherine's is really the work of the Spirit. I feel fulfilled by doing the work of the Spirit.
I cannot think of a greater calling than to render service to your fellow man at a time of need.
We have accomplished that because of the blessing that we have had by being sponsored by the Dominican Sisters of Springfield, Illinois, for the continuity that has brought to the hospital of what is our purpose here, what is the right way to view our partnership with the community, our partnership with the medical staff.
And it's more than the technology, which grows exponentially and continually changes in healthcare. There's also the sense that partnership of Dominican Sisters, physicians, employees, civic leaders, and so forth, that also has grown exponentially.
You know, as a city grew, you look at St. Dominic's now, we had the first building, then the second building, you know, behind it. You know, then the medical offices came, and then the North Campus across the street. So I think, like you say, I think the hospital has grown as the city has grown.
Even in 1971, when I first arrived at St. Dominic's, it was a very impressive operation. There were wonderful programs in place, and it was clearly an institution that really cared about the healing mission that we were about.
We've had tremendous growth here. I mean, we've added to the hospital, we've modernized the hospital, we've got the medical tower, and across the road we have another tower which has a fitness center in it, offices.
If you don't see a crane, something's wrong. You gotta see a crane because it means progress.
It's all work. and it's all going to work. It did work because the Dominican Sisters made it a point to never give up hope. They always saw something as an opportunity to change something or make it better. They don't just work in the hospital. They are the hospital.
The mission of the Dominican Sisters is one of prayer, community, and service. And the mission is really that of Jesus Christ, to bring healing not only of body, but of spirit, of mind, of comfort and compassion. And our sisters have served there in recognition of their vowed life to serve God's people.
We are God's presence to those people. They are God's presence to us.
Nothing is really hard, you know, when all hands are working together. And it's been a pleasure, you know, to work at St. Dominic's Hospital because of that.
We strive to live the gospel values that we know that Christ would want us to live and to follow. And we wouldn't ask others to live those values if we did not live those values ourselves.
If you truly understand what the whole mission of what the Dominican Sisters are asking of us, I do believe there's a much larger picture.
It's the Lord's work, not ours. And so we are going to stay anchored and look ahead to the future with enthusiasm and with the vision that the Pioneer Sisters had many, many years ago.
I think if the Pioneer Sisters were here today, they would be filled with pride. We couldn't help but be.
I think they knew the type of dedication that they were dealing with, and they trusted in their faith. They knew that what they were doing was something that was important, necessary, helpful, and loving.
They were very strong in their determination to set the strong foundation, and so today we stand on big shoulders. And I think the Pioneer Sisters would say, wow, this is someplace. And you know, what they envisioned back then has happened today, and God has blessed all of us.